Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to the Week 13 edition of the Establish the Run First Look Show. I am your host, Gary Hartman. I know I say it every week, but man, it is crazy how fast the NFL season goes. Here we are in Week 13, right in the thick of it for all things fantasy, really. 2 weeks left of the best ball season. I know FFPC main events are heading into the playoffs of the regular season as well. Only a couple weeks rest of normal season long. And of course, playoff races are heating up. And this is kind of that big hurdle that we talked about as I transition into laying the land, setting the landscape for the slate. Week 13 this year, ton of buys. It's a real juggernaut to overcome in a lot of different ways. We have 6 teams on a bye. That includes the Bills and the Ravens, 2 massive fantasy teams, as well as the Giants, Bears, Raiders, and Vikings. So 6 teams on a bye. Big deal. So we are back to a 10-game main slate. If we look at other teams off this slate, Thursday night, we got Seattle and Dallas. So another big team in Dallas that's off the slate. Sunday night, we got the Chiefs and Packers, another big team in Kansas City off the main slate. And Monday night, we have the Bengals and Jaguars. I don't think we care too much about the Cincinnati offense for fantasy purposes at the moment, but Jacksonville's we certainly do. As once again, last week, Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley was nearly optimal. Ridley was still optimal, but was nearly optimal for the majority of the Sunday afternoon. If you take a look at over-unders on this slate, we do have one that stands out, as Garfield writes about in chat, and that is the Dolphins Commanders. This game's in Washington. It sports a near 50 over-under, 49.5, which is our highest on the slate by 3.5 points. So anytime you get something like that, you want to pay attention to it. Additionally, the Dolphins have the highest team total on the main slate by 5 points. 5 points. They have a 29 team total. Houston Texans are next at a 24. Other games that have at least team over-unders that are worth exploring: 49ers Eagles sits at 46. Texans Broncos sits at 45. Lions Saints sits at 44.5. Everything else gets into the 42, 43, or in the 30s range. You got the Colts Titans at 42.5. Chargers Patriots at 42. So Jaguars. Oh, that's a Monday night. So a bunch of just pedestrian environments from there. Okay, let's dive right into this slate, starting at the quarterback position, which this week, if you called last week, and I hope you were able to play, I know a ton of people had success using established run projections, myself included. I thought it was a really interesting slate with some strong ways to attack it. My first look at this slate, I feel similarly. I think there's going to be some edges, and being that there's so many top teams off the slate, probably 1 or 2 games that people are going to attack. I think there are ways to get interesting on this slate, but at the quarterback position as a whole, there are certainly some options I like up here, but it's definitely not as strong as last week, in my opinion, where I really liked the top end. Here, I maybe like the top end or even the mid-tier even more. I don't really think there's like too many spend down options I'm interested in. Jalen Hurts sits as our most expensive quarterback, and for good reason. I've been saying this for weeks. He's probably the highest floor asset we have in fantasy football right now. And obviously he has a ceiling, right? He got to 36.5 DraftKings points against Buffalo. He's gotten to 32 other times this season. Like, that's the kind of ceiling you're looking for. He does not, in my opinion, have the same ceiling week in, week out as Josh Allen, but it's close. It doesn't matter. Josh Allen's not on this slate. Jalen Hurts is at home, but does get a tough matchup with San Francisco. Now, the one thing you have been able to do against San Francisco is pass the ball through much of this year, but it's a fishy line. The Niners are road favorites in Philly. He's the most expensive quarterback on the slate in what is ultimately still a tough matchup. I do think the way that Hurts scores touchdowns with the tush push and ultimately just his rushing upside, San Francisco can limit that. So I do think if I'm spending up at quarterback, I don't necessarily know I'm going to Hurts this week. It's never a player I rule out in any type of tournament, but it's not someone that I am excited to click on here at 8-2. CJ Stroud getting the big boy treatment once again, and for absolutely good reason. So he was 7-7 last week, and I was like, wow, he is officially the 3rd or 4th highest quarterback on the slate. He is just sitting under Patrick Mahomes. Well, in this slate, we don't have Dak Prescott. We don't have Patrick Mahomes. We don't have Josh Allen. We don't have Lamar Jackson. We don't have Trevor Lawrence. And all that leads to CJ Stroud being our second priciest quarterback on the slate. He's eclipsed Justin Herbert. So he's over 8K. And I mean, you got to understand it, right? The stats speak for themselves. 3,300 yards already, 19-5 touchdown to interception ratio. The guy is an absolute machine. I was hoping Houston would win that game just so he had a true case for the MVP. He probably is still an outside shot either way with how ugly this season has been. Here, I'm conflicted. 8-1's a expensive tag. He is at home, which is nice, but you really have to think about the fact that the Denver defense post-bye and since that really terrible start, at least since that Chiefs game, the Denver team as a whole has been pretty damn good, right? Only gave up 12 points this last week, 20 points in week 11, 22 points in week 10, 9 points in week 8, 17 points in week 7, 19 points in week 6. So it's been since week 5 when it was that Jet game when we were still so excited to attack this Broncos team. They were giving up that they were like that historically bad defense. They've completely turned it around on both sides of the ball. They're playing pretty good ball. So it's not like I look at this matchup for Stroud, now that he's over 8K, and think, hey, this is a spot I have to attack. Again, similar to Hurts, I want exposure here. I think he's proven that his ceiling is awesome. His stack options are great. I know when I'm attacking this game, I know how I like to attack it. We'll talk about some of those guys in a few minutes, but it's not like an absolute smash, hit that button type of option. Neither is Herbert. So all three of your top quarterback options, we are not that excited to play, right? The Patriots, just like, I don't believe in their ability to push at all. I don't know if they're going to win another game all year. This game's in New England. They get into these ugly, slower pace games, and the Patriots have a lot of problems, but the defense has not been it for the majority of the year, right? They are better at stopping the run, so maybe this impacts Eckler more than it does Herbert, and I don't want to rule out Justin Herbert, but this is West traveling east in cold New England, in a game environment that I'm just not excited about. I can't really justify spending 8K, especially when you have the guy right underneath him that I'm sure is going to be incredibly chalky. And I'm excited to see how ownership projections roll in here. But it has been, 6, 7, 8 weeks since we've seen a 30-point Tua Tagovailoa game. However, I still very much believe in this Dolphins offense, and you get the absolute nut spot here against Washington. Like, this has been the most steady thing we have in DFS and fantasy this year. It's attacking Washington's defense. It's particularly through the air. We've been getting massive ceiling games left and right. You see Tyreek Hill is the cover boy of this YouTube thumbnail. I mean, I can't poke holes at all in the Dolphins offense this week. So if you want to attack this game incredibly heavily, I know it'll be popular. I wouldn't be able to say that's a poor choice. I really wouldn't. Kyler Murray continues to get priced up. Remember, he started 5-9 in his first game back, and he's been really steady. Another guy doesn't have the same kind of floor as Jalen Hurts, but every time he's out there, he really does seem to come in right around 20 points just for being out there. We have not seen the Kyler explosion games that we've seen in the past, and this is a little bit of a tougher spot going into Pittsburgh. So now that he's up to 7K, again, not someone that I'm super interested in here. Goff, have the long rest from Thanksgiving. I don't mind attacking this spot. New Orleans has a defense that's pretty good. He's 6'5". He's kind of middle of the pack compared to all these spend up options here. It's just like a tournament option for me. If I want to attack this dome game as kind of the one that I'm interested in, because I can't justify doing the Derek Carr side. So I don't hate Goff in tournaments. I think Howell is really good though. So other side, you're still getting exposure to the game. You're saving a lot of money off Tua. Howell has proven time and time again here, and that he has a ceiling, especially to pay off these low 6 tags. And DraftKings hasn't priced him up, right? So he's eclipsed 30 points once. He's been at 29. He's been at 28. He's been over 20 for 5 straight games between 20 and 35 points. Like, this is a quarterback that always has game script that works in his favor because they're almost always playing from behind. This is a pace that can get way up there. This is they're at home. He's thrown the ball over 40 times for 6 straight games. Like, this is a really good Sam Howell spot at 6-2. Again, I don't know how ownership's going to shake out between Howell and Tua, but I'm very interested in both guys, as I am Brock Purdy, who, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, we were into it against that Tampa Bay matchup as well, and that was his closest that he's gotten to 30 points, right, with the 333 and 3 through the air. And that's exactly, in my opinion, what's in store once again here. We've got to take a look at weather in Philly, but we just saw what Josh Allen did. I know Brock Purdy is not Josh Allen. I'm not saying he is. But again, I mentioned this kind of sketchy line with the Niners being road favorites. You've been able to gash Philly through the air all season. The Niners are rolling. They're on long rest from Thanksgiving. I have no issues at 6-1 attacking Brock Purdy here. In fact, I like it quite a bit. From there, I'm not getting to Stafford against the Browns again. He finally had his best. He did have his best DFS performance of the year against Arizona, but that was predictable. That was in Arizona. This is a home matchup against the Browns. I just don't know if the ceiling is there for you. I will attack Russ on the other side of that Denver game because I mentioned how Houston seems to get themselves in these shootouts every single week, and they've been a team that you absolutely can pass on. So while I question CJ Stroud at 8-1, and we have not necessarily seen the ceiling, he's definitely been a game manager, a successful one at that. I could see this being a Russell Wilson week where he kind of gets back up to what he did against Washington, what he gets against the Bears. And at 5-7, if you're getting in the mid-20s, you feel pretty good about that. After that, again, I mentioned I have a really hard time justifying Derek Carr. I just don't think there's any ceiling there. They are at home in a dome, in an environment that's one of the decent ones on the week. So if that's your kind of thing, I guess. I really talked up Gardner Minshew last week, and I feel like it should have been a much bigger game. He dropped back 41 times. Luckily, he had the rushing touchdown to save his day from a floor perspective at 5-1. This is another spot you can attack, though. He can throw the ball here. It looks like they just lost Justin Taylor. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a spot that you can attack. I just don't know if there's a ceiling there. And, same thing for all of these guys down here. It's a really hard sell. Bryce Young, I wish shown us a semblance of a ceiling because this is a spot that theoretically I love to attack. He's under 5K. We've been attacking the Tampa Bay pass offense all year. Maybe having the fired coach narrative can get it, but this would be like a sprinkle MME, sprinkle only for me. And that's kind of where we're at in quarterback. So it's an interesting week. I'm really probably can keep my quarterback pool kind of small this week. On the running back side of things, it looks like once again, this is going to be a spend up at receiver kind of week. Christian McCaffrey gets the Eagles, where we've been able to pass on the Eagles for sure, but they still have a great run D. If you look at this DraftKings metric, they are first against opposing running backs. The difference with Christian McCaffrey is A, I think he's matchup proof. B, he does a lot of his damage through the air, right? He's had either 5 or 6 catches in 4 straight games. He has receiving touchdowns in half the games this season. He, just by being out on the field, is a walking 20 points. So I do not mind getting up to Christian McCaffrey. And I don't know. I wonder if his ownership, because I think everyone's going to spend up at receiver, is a little bit down this week. Eckler, I mean, you can paint the squeaky wheel narrative and a Chargers should be playing from ahead type of narrative here, but it has not really been there the last 2 weeks for Eckler. And even the 3 weeks prior when he had 20 points, we haven't seen an explosion game from Austin Eckler to pay off his mid-first round price tag since, week 1. So I'm not super excited about spending up at Eckler this week. Keenan Allen's just been dominating through the air over there as well, which usually when they're on the field together, it's Keenan Allen, leading up to this season at least, it's Keenan Allen whose ceiling has gone down. This year it seems to have been Austin Eckler's. Kamara for sure benefits from Derek Carr. I mentioned last week I was only interested if Carr was playing because of the check down stuff, and we still saw that 4 for 50 through the air. I just don't know if the ceiling is there right now. Splitting some work, not the best matchup against Detroit. Mostert had 2 more touchdowns with Achane still on the shelf. Could have got an even bigger game against the Jets, right? Was 6 yards away from the bonus, had 21.4. They aggressively priced him back up into the 7K tier that we saw him be in the middle of the season. I don't mind it because I want to keep attacking this games from all angles. I am curious the status of Achane, and we'll see what happened there. Jeff Wilson also started to finally have a lot more work, and he's only 4.6. He had 11 carries and 3 catches. If Achane is out, I think that is a very nice spend down option for you. Absolutely. Kieran Williams was completely underowned and overlooked, and that was with having ownership. Excuse the New York City noises. That was with having ownership last week. The guy has one of the best roles in fantasy football. 16 for 143 on the ground, another 6 for 61 through the air and 2 touchdowns to go over 40 DraftKings points. Now they brought him up to 7-2. This is the kind of play that to me is so good simply based on the role. Now this is not the best matchup against Cleveland, but you know what? You got Cleveland traveling out west. This is, I think that their defense, the role is just so good that I would be okay attacking that. Jonathan Taylor, we just got news that he's got a thumb injury that could be threatening his availability moving forward. That to me means that he's probably not playing this week. It's a tough matchup against Tennessee on the ground. We attack him through the air more, but Zach Moss, the same as Jeff Wilson, is all the way down to 4.6. And we remember the kind of scores Moss is putting up weeks 1 through 5, right? So let's not forget that. And especially even in a tougher matchup at 4.6, that's a player that we're going to attack heavily, probably would be a cash option for us. And we'd have to see where ownership comes in, but will be a really good play. I was very into Derrick Henry last week. I thought it was going to be good chalk, and he still got there because he found the end zone twice, but only 18 for 76 on the ground. I don't understand why Tennessee was being so pass heavy. Henry was effective on the ground, and I think they really could have controlled the game and had it way more in hand if they weren't letting Levis drop back so much. This is a spot here where I like the matchup again at home. Again, I start to like late season Derrick Henry quite a bit. I don't think he's the same player that he was 2-3 years ago, but I do think that we still have 30s in there for Derrick Henry. He had 27 against Cincinnati in the right game environment. We've been able to run on the Colts for much of this year. I do not mind at all attacking Derrick Henry. Gibbs and Montgomery, I don't want to say they're canceling each other out because they both still have a major ceiling on this team. But I don't know if together fully healthy with big workloads, especially in kind of negative or down matchups, which the Saints have a good run D, if I'm interested in attacking them. Obviously, they make my GPP player pool, but not something that I'm super excited about. Bijan, on the other hand, I am super excited about because he still is far underpriced. I'm surprised because DraftKings the last couple of weeks has been aggressive in getting players' prices up if they are warranted, like see Tank Dell or CJ Stroud, and et cetera. Those are just the examples that come to mind for me right now. But Bijan, now 2 straight weeks where the role has been excellent, right? Excellent. Another 19 touches for him in week 12. Found the end zone twice, one on the ground, one through the air. Very efficient as well. Could have had a bigger game, was kind of close to the bonus now for 2 straight weeks. Finally, Arthur Smith figured out that we need to use this guy. And he gets a Jets team that is just completely defeated. And where have we been killing the Jets all year defensively? It's been on the ground. Bijan is a great play this week, an absolutely great play. Swift, I'm interested in correlation. So if you want to attack this Eagles 49ers game heavily, that's where I'm interested in Swift. Again, not an easy matchup for him, but he can get it done through the air. Maybe there's some dump off stuff. It's just average to me. Brees on the other side of that Falcons game, it's really hard to invest in anything Jets right now. Now, he has been double-digit points every single week since week 5. But if you look at what those double-digit points are for 3 of the last 4 weeks, it's right around 10 points. It's nice that he has like a little floor there if you ended up playing him, but it's not a big enough ceiling. Meanwhile, Rachaad White has a great floor that's been so consistent, like right between 16 and 18 points for the majority of his weeks. And 6-3 is a tag that I want to attack because it's really easy where, last week, 15 for 100 on the ground, definitely his most efficient run game of the season, right? 6.7 yards a carry, only had 2 for 10 through the air. But finds the end zone once, and we're literally sitting in the mid-20s at a 6-1 tag. So I do I'm going to keep liking attacking Rachaad White here. It's a good matchup. Carolina's a mess. They're at home. Rachaad White is just a really good DFS asset, especially on full point PPR DraftKings right now. Brian Robinson, he spikes. He's like a spike week guy, which is kind of what you're looking for in DFS. Again, if I'm looking to attack this Miami-Washington game heavily, I don't want to ignore him. Ramondre ended up being decent chalk last week. Could have been an even bigger game, 2 yards away from the bonus, and gets a pretty good matchup here with the Chargers. So if they're going to keep feeding him, just like with the ability that they know they have no other playmakers or anyone on offense, I understand attacking that. So there's a lot of options here. Again, I'm not really spending up at running back, but there are a ton of options in the mid-tier. Devin Singletary is one of them too, because as good as the Broncos defense has been now in the second half of the season and just the Broncos as a whole, I still think that they are beatable on the ground. And let's not kid ourselves that this is a split backfield between Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, because in Pierce's first game back, yes, he did not really do anything. If only 13 points, he was saved through his pass catching role, but he still outsnapped Dameon Pierce 49-11. And now he's back under 6K. I think Devin Singletary is a fine tournament play. From there, we'll go quickly through some of these names. James Conner is going to be in play for his role, but it's not an easy matchup in Pittsburgh. Javonte Williams had 18 carries. That was really encouraging. So if you want to attack that game, I don't mind that. Jerome Ford also liked the role still quite a bit, and I think there's a ceiling there, so I don't mind attacking him. Jalen Warren and Najee Harris get an excellent matchup against Arizona. This is the team that Kieran Williams just went nuts on. Now, the problem is, this is a split backfield. The flip side of that is I think Jalen Warren is incredibly talented with the ceiling. Najee has some touchdown upside, found the end zone last week, had a pretty good game, was a yard away from the bonus, and they're still very, very cheap in the 5K. So I'm going to be attacking a lot of that. So once again, I think I want to be in the mid-tier, spending down at running back this week. And then again, I mentioned the Zach Moss, Jeff Wilson thing. Like, there's going to be a ton of, this is going to be the way you save money on this slate. So just keep an eye on where ownership settles in there. Running back, fascinating. Probably dictates the slate, the way you attack running back this week and the way ownership shakes out. I will just say, as a kind of a macro point, the position I care least about at ownership is quarterback. The position I care second least about for ownership by far is running back. It's just so critical to get the right points where there's always going to be guys at receiver, even if you're not hitting the optimal guy. For example, Michael Pittman last week. I don't think he ended up being optimal, had like moderate ownership, but he was half a point off from the guy who was optimal in front of him. Like, I care more about getting contrarian at receivers because you're going to be able to get uniqueness there, where running back, usually the guys that hit over 25 points, they do that. For the leverage column this week, if you're a subscriber, I'm thinking about doing a deep dive on receiver optimal history. I've done one on tight end and running back this year, and maybe we'll see if my thesis plays out when I do a research project essentially on that. But I do think that ownership matters way more at receiver than running back. So let's talk about receiver. Tyreek Hill gets the cover boy. I don't think there's any sure asset outside of Jalen Hurts right now in fantasy than Tyreek Hill. And that is crazy because to me, historically, Tyreek Hill was like this boomer bust 5-point or 40-point guy. This year, he has 3 games of like pedestrian play. And those 3 games are 10 points, 15 points, and 13 points. Every other week, he's been between 20 and 47 points. Like, this is a guy that gets the nut matchup of the week. He's 9.6, so he's like absurdly most expensive, the most expensive player on the slate, right? 600 more than Christian McCaffrey, but I guarantee you people are still going to find their way to Tyreek Hill, and for good reason. Have no issues. I do think Jalen Waddle, again, will be a fascinating pivot because he will be owned. Don't get me wrong. He'll be owned. But cash lineups are all going to play Tyreek Hill. They're going to be able to find the cash with the way running backs looking this week, maybe spending down a quarterback. So I do think the way that when cash lineups just kind of flood someone, it does, the ownership trickles over to tournaments, right? People aren't playing Hill and Waddle probably in cash together. Waddle is trending in the right direction, 8 for 114 in that Jets game, 7-6. You're saving 2,000 from Tyreek. So again, I love both guys. I don't have an issue. I have to capitulate on Keenan Allen. I guess my priors on Keenan Allen have just gotten me where I thought, okay, hey, age model 1, 2. If you look historically from a ceiling perspective, when Eckler is out there, Keenan had not been getting to these 30s and 40s. And this year, it's just been the opposite. Just dominating every single metric you look at from the Chargers. They don't trust Quentin Johnston. Mike Williams is on the shelf. So he is like option 1, 2, and 3 right now. And this is a really good matchup for him as well against New England. I'd rather attack New England through the air. It's just like a PPR monster. And, you can understand why he's 9K. So just, again, another model of consistency here. He's had 2 games over 40 points this year on DraftKings. I love Keenan Allen. I'm capitulating hard at this point on him. AJ Brown also, we are due for a massive game. And this is like, again, I don't mind. I think this is a good game to attack in full game stacks because the way you beat both of these teams is through the air. So maybe I want to ignore Christian McCaffrey. I want to ignore DeAndre Swift. And I want to do like Purdy, Ayuk, Kittle with an AJ Brown bring back. I think constructions like that this week are going to be fascinating and could easily win a tournament, especially if you wanted to kind of fade away from the Miami, Washington stuff a little bit just to get unique. This would be a spot I'm looking to attack. So AJ Brown, they lower his price a little bit. He had eclipsed 9K last week. We are now did find the end zone to save his day a little bit and had 9 targets. But for the Eagles scoring 34 points, you want to see a lot more out of AJ Brown. I do think this is a spot he can get right. I do love Sun God always. I think he's a really high floor player. He's 8.5. If you're attacking that game, I want some exposure there. Cooper Kupp is, I think at this point we kind of just have to wait and see. It was Tyler Higbee and Tutu Atwell last week, right? Now we are getting Cooper Kupp at below 8K. So this is the type of play that I attack in tournaments, but this is a game against Cleveland. We've been not only not a ceiling game in 5 weeks, but look at those box scores. This is 5 straight weeks between 2 and 7 points for Cooper Kupp. That is scary. It's scary. Mike Evans historically crushes the Panthers, and he's maybe having, I know Levitan tweeted yesterday, he's maybe having the best season of his career. Look at his box score against the Panthers the last couple of years. And this is a guy that just touchdown equity so high, has 9 touchdowns. I have no issues getting there. It's tough. I don't think he's going to be that owned because I don't think it's a game environment people want to attack, and he's up to 7.7. Already talked about Waddle. Tank Dell getting priced up aggressively week in, week out, right? Jumped from 5.9 to 6.9. Now 6.9 to 7.4. Don't love Dell at 7.4. I do love Tank Dell. Absolutely love Tank Dell. But again, I don't love attacking this Denver defense right now through the air. It's not my favorite spot. I want exposure. And it could have been a bigger day for Dell because he had a catch that was taken away that maybe shouldn't have been. A 62-yard catch negated by a legal shift, right? That's what drag. And so that would have been, think about that, right? Add a 6 for another, that's 6 for 112 and a touchdown there. You're once again at a huge near 30-point week for Tank Dell. So I do think those games are in it. I don't know if this is the spot, but I love been loving this Texans offense for DFS purposes. Devonta Smith finally got over 100 receiving yards. Woo. He had been at 99, 2 or 3 times this year. So it had been for the first time since week 2. Again, I like both Smith and AJ Brown here. So if you need the money to save on Smith, I still think AJ Brown has a significantly higher ceiling. Absolutely love Brandon Ayuk and Debo. I think both guys are good, but I love Ayuk here as like the true over the top type of guy that have been crushing this Eagles pass defense. But Debo also kind of cold weather, aggressive game, usually a Debo style game for me. So similar thing, like you have Waddle and Hill, you have Smith and Brown, you have Debo and Ayuk, and I love all these spots. It's just kind of what makes your construction work. If you're an MME player or a mass entry player, you want to make sure I have all the different combinations covered, in my opinion, this week. Puka's all the way down to 7, and at least he now is not like Cup, where 2 of the last 5 weeks he has had usable weeks. Targets are still there, but tough matchup against Cleveland. I like the price, though. Pittman priced up, good matchup here. Did hit last week. I was all over it. 10 for 107, 13 targets. One of the best roles in fantasy right now. And again, if Jonathan Taylor's out, I think they have to lean on the pass game a little bit more. People don't want to click on a 7K. People don't want to click on a 7K Michael Pittman. So, talk about that. Nico Collins was awesome also last week. Again, this is a spot with both Texans pass catchers that you can consider double stacks, traditional double stacks. It's a nice concentrated offense. If Noah Brown's still out, it's even more concentrated. Thielen's come back down, crashing back down to earth, right? He had all those huge weeks 1 through 6. Now, if you look at the second half of the season, he's just been a pedestrian. 15 points has been his high. Now, they have brought his price all the way back down to 6.6, which is a way more usable price, and this is a very good matchup. I'm curious if the field has short memories here. And are looking at recent box scores and don't attack it, because I am interested in Adam Thielen this week, especially with the squeaky wheel narrative and especially with the new coaching staff, everything going on there. Again, Godwin, I don't love Chris Godwin when you have Mike Evans there, but he's cheap. He's cheap. Debo, we like Debo. We already talked about him. Hopkins, 6K against the Colts. No issues with that. And then if you keep going down here, you got Terry McLaurin at only 5.5 on the other side of the game. All of Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel should be of interest to you this week, because this is going to be the way you save some money in your stacks on that game, right? So Curtis Samuel is all the way down to 4.1. He'll certainly be in cheap wide receiver volume. And then Jahan Dotson also back under 5K. And he had shown a couple ceiling or spike weeks and then came back crashing down to earth. I mentioned I like Sam Howell. If he does, he's going to have to take some of these guys along with him. Josh Downs still too cheap. Cortland Sutton has a nose for the end zone. Have a hard time attacking Cleveland guys right now. Same thing with Garrett Wilson, despite him only being 6K. Everything else, check out cheap wide receiver volume. All right, quickly through tight end. Excellent George Kittle spot. Excellent. Now, he's having one of the best seasons of his career. Had it coming off a down week in that Seattle game. This is the spot, though, right? Eagles forever have been killed against tight ends, middle of the field. Gritty game, big game for the NFC, potential NFC championship rematch, preview and rematch. Really like George Kittle here at 6.2 with no Kelsey on the slate. No more, obviously, Andrews is out, and all of those big names. Laporta, this would be the spot if I'm attacking the Lions that I'm most interested in, I think. He's 5.6. The Saints have been vulnerable against tight ends. If you like attacking that dome game, I do like Laporta, and I like him more than the $400 from Taysom Hill, who is a tough sell to me at that kind of price. Schultz, though, really good, right? I think the one place we've still been able to beat the Broncos is through the middle of the field and through tight ends. So do like Schultz, and maybe I like Nico Collins a little bit better than Tank Dell this week, not only for the price, but for kind of the way you attack that Texans, that Broncos defense. Trey McBride, I'm surprised they didn't bring him up over 5K, because despite only ending with 7 for 60, still had 9 targets. Like, the role is excellent here. Matchup against Pittsburgh is not the best, but something to consider. Goddard, we'll see if he's back, because if he's sub 5K and another way to attack that game, you could do it. Freiermuth gets the big price up from 29 to 43. And, I don't think it's a coincidence that, hey, A, we have another week separated from him returning, and then B, the Matt Canada firing, and they ran their offense through Freiermuth. So I missed it. I love myself a good value tight end. Who doesn't? And I just didn't have nearly enough Freiermuth last week. But 9 for 120, you can't ignore this performance, and it's a great matchup against Arizona. And the price isn't too expensive here at 4.3. I think it's fine. Njoku is still a target monster for DTR, so I think that's something to consider. But I just don't know if the ceiling is there. I know all the ADOT stuff's low, but if you're going to get this type of target share as the clear favorite target for the new quarterback and kind of a safety blanket in a good matchup with the Rams, I don't mind attacking that. Higbee came out of nowhere for his 2 touchdowns. I don't think I'm going there. From, down here, you got Parham. You can throw in your player pool, although Everett was the guy last week, right, who had 4 for 43 and a touchdown. My spend on options this week at tight end are not super enticing. I do like Chigakonkwo, who just keeps falling through the cracks. I think we're getting a spike week one of these days, although he has not cracked double-digit points, but you're getting the salary saving there. Conklin was able to get 4 for 33 with Tim Boyle. I just don't know if I trust any aspects of that offense. If I were to, that may be a spot to attack, kind of the spend down option if you want like a mini stack with Bijan Robinson. I don't mind it because that's a pretty good matchup for him. But you don't have great punts this week. So again, I kind of like this spend up mid-tier at tight end. Kittle, I think, will come with ownership as a result. All right, very interesting slate. Once again, we'll have you covered all week here at Establish the Run with team-by-team pods later today from Adam and Evan. Of course, keep an eye on projections. Ownership projections are going to be critical this week. I'll be back on schedule for a normal content schedule for me. Cheap wide receiver volume on Thursday. Leverage probably on Saturday morning. Excited for this week 13. I wish you all the best of luck in DFS, in fantasy, in best ball, in your life. Hope everyone had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and we will see you next week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Good luck, everyone.